Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 20 of the Trop Rock 101 podcast from Pirates and Poets. I am your host, John Burns. Thank you so much for being with us. This episode features a conversation between myself and my good friend, Jim Hoehn. Many of you are familiar with Jim as a singer-songwriter that performs at a lot of the events and house concerts associated with the Trop Rock community. He is a man that wears a lot of hats, though. He made his living for a long time as a sports writer, as a journalist. He teaches college courses about the history of rock and roll music. He also works for the VA. So music is really just kind of a serious hobby for him, but it's worked out pretty well for him. He is very accomplished as a songwriter and a performer. Gotten to play a lot of cool gigs over the years. We talk about all that, but before we get to the interview, I want to tell you about an event we have coming up for Pirates and Poets. At the end of February 26th and 27th, we will be heading down to Port Aransas, Texas, for our 11th annual Pirates and Poets Songwriter Invitational. 3 shows over 2 days. We will have a very limited in-person audience, but we will also be live streaming all 3 shows for you to enjoy. The live stream will be free. We just hope that you will find the digital tip jar on PayPal or Venmo and send us some love. Friday night, we will have Mark Morales doing a short solo set, followed by James Sonny Jim White, backed up by Melanie Howe. That's a pretty unique show. You don't want to miss that. The next day, we'll have Jerry Diaz and Mark Morales broadcasting, coming at you live from Shorty's. They're in Port Aransas, the world's greatest dive bar. And then on a Saturday evening, we will have the main event, the real signature show for Pirates and Poets, Songwriters in the Round, hosted by Kitty Stedman, featuring Kelly McGuire and Dan Sullivan. Again, we are sold out in person, very limited attendance, but we will be broadcasting the show free on our Facebook page, multi-camera live stream, mixed sound, so it's going to be a high-quality production as the best we can do for you. So I hope you'll tune in and hope you'll send us some love via the digital tip jar. Again, that's the end of February 26th and 27th. Back to Jim Hoehn. The man has accomplished a lot. We talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about the events he's played over the years, the people he has performed with, the friendships he's made. We talk about his adventures, not only in trop rock music, but also in the Texas and Americana scenes. Jim has been a proponent of independent singer-songwriters and performers for decades. I've known the man for about 15 years, and he was carrying the flag for independent musicians long before I met him. And that really comes out in his compilation albums that he put together. Thongs in the Key of Life. Jim put out 4 of those starting in the late 90s to about 2010 or so. If you get a chance, you can find those used copies on Amazon sometimes or eBay. So check that out. So here it is. The one and only. And you know what? He's normally really long-winded, but he kind of kept it kind of short this time. So anyway, please enjoy my conversation with Jim Hoehn.
Well, I think I discovered, you stumble across Jimmy Buffett because I started to listen to a lot of different music. It's a long time ago, but I was actually in the Air Force in San Antonio, Texas in the mid-'70s. And had not been exposed to a lot of the Texas singer-songwriters. And then when you got down there and you started hearing guys like Jerry Jeff and Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt, it just led to more exploration of that kind of music. And then kind of the Jerry Jeff stuff led to Buffett before the Changes in Latitude album. So you started listening to that early stuff, and I always liked his writing. And then just, became a fan of his writing and actually saw him in concert for the first time back in San Antonio in the old days. I think it was the old Hemisphere Arena. Opening act was the Amazing Rhythm Aces, probably $12 a ticket, but and then always liked his stuff and pretty much bought everything that he ever released. But still listen to a lot of the other same old singer-songwriters, Jerry Jeff, Billy Joe Shaver, and they've all led to younger writers. Of course, you got John Prine and Steve Goodman, and the writers that had songs on those great albums by Buffett and Jerry Jeff. Steve Goodman, John Sebastian, certainly in Cherry Jeff's case, you had Guy Clark and Gary P. Nunn. And it all, to me, it was all just writers, that kind of Chris Christopherson, John Prine, even Gordon Lightfoot genre. Singer-songwriters, back when they didn't really have to have a label. They were just guys that wrote great songs.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Those of you who have been into Buffett for a long, long, long time, how back in those days, he was really only one step removed from the kind of the outlaw country guys.
Yeah,
Jerry Jeff and that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. You listen to like Railroad Lady, which was a co-write with Cherry Jeff, and there's not much difference. They're storytellers. And, at the time, I think when Changes in Latitude was coming out, which of course triggered the whole Margaritaville empire, prior to that, you had Come Monday, I think was the only radio song you ever heard. But that never bothered me. I mean, I probably listened to way more music that was not on the radio than there was. And of course, you didn't have the internet outlets then, so you were pretty much by what you could find on the dial. That was it. And then, not having a Bluetooth or an aux cord for your phone, I mean, you were pretty much limited to what they released on cassette and 8-track.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if some of the Texas scene, and by Texas scene, I mean even including Buffett and back in those days, was that network of live music venues. People, I mean, Texas is huge, but East and Central Texas, there's a 300 to 500 capacity music hall every hour. So people could travel pretty easy, and the word could spread pretty fast. In the old days, between those towns.
Right, and I think the classic Texas dance halls like, Green Hall and Flores Country Store, those kind of places lend themselves to live music, not just a concert hall, but the dancing and everything else. And they were big venues, and back then you might see Jerry Jeff or, Gary P. Nunn and later Robert O'Keefe and Pat Green, Ray Hubbard and those guys at those venues. They weren't inaccessible. And then before the big Live Nation type stadium shows, some of those other artists used to play smaller venues in the winter. Chicago had a vibrant folk scene built around the Old Town School of Folk. And, if your folk music scene produces both John Prine and Steve Goodman, that's a pretty solid foundation.
Yeah. So you were stationed you were in San Antonio because you were in the Air Force.
Correct.
So you probably went to basic in San Antonio and then got stationed there as well, or?
Yeah, I stayed there the whole time.
It's not a bad place because you were not far from Green Hall, the Austin scene, Lukenbach, all that.
Right. And I'd been to all those places. And then I was very fortunate because back then men's fast pitch softball was a big military sport. And I was a ball player as well. So what that meant was on every weekend during the season, I have given up home runs in Cuero, Yoakum, Beeville, Port Lavaca. So every one of those places, though, a lot of times those weekend tournaments were in conjunction with some sort of small town festival. And all of those festivals had live music. So even though you weren't seeing, what would become household names or famous people, you were exposed to really good music, and I liked it. And then you would either buy an album or a cassette or a 45 from the band, and that was your access at that point. You didn't go to Amazon and order 12 CDs or 5,000 digital downloads. But that whole exposure to different parts of Texas, different music, was fabulous. And you weren't much more than an hour from Austin. And even back then, there was a great quote from the late writer Dan Jenkins, who kind of said that period of Austin made Berkeley look like a Boy Scout camp. So, yeah, I would go up to Austin as often as I could and see bands and music and different venues. And out in Fredericksburg, they had something called the Great Lukenbach World's Fair. Went to that. I mean, it was just basically exploration, and an entirely different type of musical culture than I had been exposed to. You come out of Wisconsin, everything sounds like a polka. Some of that Texas stuff was pretty good.
Yeah, I wonder if Buffett ever played like Green Hall. I'm pretty sure I've seen programs from where he played Armadillo World Headquarters, but I wonder if he ever played like Green Hall.
I don't know. But yeah, we would go to the Armadillo, which was just such a unique place. I mean, to people who've never been there, had not been there. And of course, that led into, Doug Somm and the Douglas Quintet and Rusty Weir and trying to think. Well, of course, certainly Commander Cody, who I believe was the house band at the Armadillo for a while, and all of that has continued. I mean, you still. I'm fortunate that one of the offshoots of my writing is somehow I ended up teaching this class in Wisconsin called the History of Rock. Basically, it's called Rock Music Roots and History, and you try and bring things up from the history of rock and roll into the contemporary times. And we had talked about the Eagles, of course, and the Beatles. And then, during the last semester, I actually showed a new song called Bad Trick by Ray Wylie Hubbard to a rock music class because Ringo was playing drums and Joe Walsh was on slide.
Oh, wow.
So it was a fabulous song. But to me, Ray Hubbard's like this mystic genius and far as well known as Up Against the Wall Redneck Mother is. It's far from his best writing. But it was to show he's still contemporary and you can write, and how that writing has made an impact across a wide range of genres. I mean, you don't get guys like Ringo and Joe Walsh, Chris Robinson from the Black Crowes, and Don Was on bass if you're some Texas bar unknown. I think there's a level of appreciation for that kind of writing.
Yeah, and it wasn't ZZ Top. Rodney Crowell did something very similar a couple years ago. I think it was Rodney Crowell, where he had a bunch of rock and roll legends backing him up on a couple songs on his last record. I can't remember the name of the song right now, but it's something that those guys that kind of broke out in the 70s and 80s in the Texas scene, you realize that they have this respect from what the world thinks of as true rock and roll gods and so on.
Yeah, I mean, about, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, Don Henley did a solo album called Cass County that is just phenomenal. And his the musicians on that and the other singers, I mean, they include everybody from Vince Gill to Mick Jagger. And it's very much an Americana album. And and that's that Texas outlaw country. It depends what you call it. I always remember Steve Fromholz talking about surviving the great progressive country scare, which was another name for it. But, Americana music, Texas music, I got the Red Dirt sound out of Oklahoma. And I just liked it all. I mean, I kind of absorbed that stuff. And there a lot of them they're just good writers.
Yeah, so I want to bring this back around to the Buffett and the Parrothead stuff. Actually, before we go there, you may be able to answer this question. Jerry Diaz and I got to talking a couple of weeks ago on a car ride, and both of us are fairly certain that David Allan Coe and Buffett had some kind of feud going on for a while, but we can't remember anything about it. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know if it was the feud, but isn't there a David Allan Coe song that Jimmy Buffett doesn't live in Key West anymore?
Something like that. We couldn't remember.
David Allan Coe veered off into an album called Compass Point, which I could probably turn around and dig through the C's in the record collection behind me and hold up the cover. But he's dressed like a pirate, and I believe it's got a nautical chart on the front. And that was, I think, maybe the Divers Do It Deeper song and some other stuff. But there is a David Allan Coe song. I actually believe it's called Jimmy Buffett Doesn't Live in Key West Anymore. So whether there's a feud or not, I don't know. From what you hear, David Allan Coe feuded with everybody.
I don't know how we got off on that. We were driving down to Galveston a couple of weeks ago, and we got off on a David Allen Coe tangent. Mary was trying to tell us that he wrote "Please Come to Boston." We were going, no, no. But anyway, that led to that, and then I'd forgotten about it. And then I was like, Jim Hoehn knows every wild out there story in the world. He might know something about this, so I'll have to
Well, I'm
look
not
that up.
sure. I'm not sure. I just, for some reason, I remember that song.
Yeah, Jimmy Buffett. I'm going to write this down. Doesn't live in Key West anymore. I wonder if that's what inspired Brent to write
But that,
"Living the
yeah,
Life."
it's a David Allen Coe song. Jimmy Buffett doesn't live in Key West. You can find it on YouTube, just like everything else.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up, and I will link to that, folks, from the show notes from this episode, if you want to check that out. So anyway, at what point did you kind of become involved with? I'm guessing that you probably stumbled on a Parrot Head Club somewhere, and that kind of got you into the scene, or how did you get into the more
Well,
organized world of Parrot Heads and eventually trop rock music?
well, first off, I don't think there is such a thing as the organized world of parrot heads. I think that might be giving them a lot of credit. There's a structured world of parrot heads. I'm not sure about organization, but I really didn't at first. I was like anybody else. I was I liked music. I was a legend in my own shower, and just had picked up a guitar. Nobody in my family had ever seen me. I wasn't in choir or anything. And obviously, if you've heard my music, you know I wasn't in choir or any kind of vocal anything. But I picked up a guitar, and like anybody else, you learn those first three chords, and then you start listening to stuff on the radio, and you're kind of like, well, geez, I could write that. Anybody could write that. And so I wrote a couple of songs and entered a songwriting contest. Ironically, had gone down to see some friends of mine. A guy that I played rugby with was in a kind of a 50s and 60s rock band. And they had a poster on the wall, enter the songwriting contest. And I did. I had written 2 songs, so I entered. Got a call that got to the next round, needed more songs. So I wrote 3 more, and then I got to the finals and somehow won it. And next thing you know, it's a gig at Summerfest. It's enough time to do a demo. About 6 weeks later, it's opening for Jerry Jeff, and then you're just kind of going. But the early songs that I learned, were songs I liked, and a lot of those were Jimmy Buffett songs. So I probably played in public a couple times, including some badly played Buffett songs in my set list, before I stumbled on the local Parrot Head Club came later. I might have actually played in Key West before I really stumbled on the Milwaukee Parrot Heads.
Oh, wow. Going back to the songwriting contest, anything that came out of that contest still in the set list today?
Humanity Night.
Wow.
That was one of the later ones I wrote. And I really don't. I did a demo tape called I don't even know the year, 1991 Clerical Error Tour. And when people ask, how did you end up winning the contest? The statement was it had to be a clerical error. So got some studio time, and ironically, I don't know even how there wasn't anything real tropical on there. And I can't remember. I'd done a song at one point called Bimbet de Jour. That might have been in that mix, but it came later. But somehow that cassette tape ended up in the hands of, I got a call. I was covering high school basketball tournament season. I'd been gone for about 3 weeks. And my wife said, somebody named Ruth Nunn from Oklahoma is looking for you. Well, I had no idea. I'm thinking, do I owe anybody in Oklahoma money? And did not ring a bell. So I called the number, and the guy answered, and I said, is Ruth Nunn there? And he said, oh no, she's out on the ranch. And I said, okay, well, I was just returning a call. And he goes, well, I'm Gary, her husband. Even as slow as I am, it started to click. I'm like, are you Gary P. Nunn? And he goes, yeah. And he said, oh, you're the sports writer guy from Wisconsin. We got a demo tape that you did. I like your songs. You want to come down and play my festival? And I don't know about you, but I was pretty quick to respond. Yes. I mean, that was
Yeah, you jump on that opportunity.
yeah. So I did, but that was all. That was just a little 11-song guitar vocal demo cassette with no overdubbing, no anything. It really wasn't very good, but the songs were kind of the start of. It was. You can tell they're my songs. It's the way I think. I think my writing's evolved. I don't know if it's gotten any better. It's gotten weirder, um, but even back then there was some odd stuff. Um, and it just kind of evolved. And the Buffett stuff was it had an audience. There were very few people, especially in Wisconsin, playing any Buffett music. And if you could play an entire set of it, you could get a gig at a yacht club or a festival or something. So for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I played with a very good guitar player named Kevin Malvena, who was the best Harry Chapin tribute artist I've ever seen. And that's what we did. And that's how we got to Meeting of the Minds and Put-in Bay and a couple of the Parrot Head festivals. And that led to more festivals. And, I guess if you're persistent and you write good cover letters and you show up on time, you continue to get hired.
Yeah, and both you and Kevin ended up with a cut on the Boat Drunks debut album.
No, no. Well, yeah, the first album, yeah, we each had one, and then Kevin, I think, had one on their Cover the Tracks too. But like I said, if you've never, Kevin's a good writer as well as a good guitar player. But if you want to hear somebody do Harry Chapin as close to Harry Chapin as ever, it's Kevin. So I learned a lot from him. Found out what worked for us, got a nice niche, and then he was doing his family stuff, I was doing my work, and we just kind of went our separate ways musically, and I like doing it. I could often combine sports writing trips or family trips with some music, or a little bit of getaways, and just continue to plug away at it. And I said I got a pretty good niche. I'm pretty fortunate. And then you go, that really back then, late 90s, there wasn't what you would call a trop rock scene of any kind, because you would stumble across other songwriters, and a lot of it was who you'd see on the road or at a festival,
right?
Or hear rumors of, because you didn't have websites, you didn't have nobody was tweeting out their gigs or their Facebook page or anything. That didn't exist. And so I probably had 50 CDs rattling around on the floor of my van, and you'd pick them up and listen to them. And a lot of them were the local ones you got from people. And so many of them had one killer song and then 11 atrocious ones. And you'd start to think, wow, these would be great if they were all together. And it just kind of evolved into a project. And I told my wife, don't look at the checkbook, we'll be fine. End up getting the artwork from a woman in Florida, and produced, I think, the first Thongs in the Key of Life compilation came out in 1999. And nobody knew who Brent Burns was. James White, a friend of mine, had seen him in the Caymans and sent me a couple of cassettes. I'd heard of John Reno because he was doing a college show called something like Pirates, Poets, and Margaritas.
Yeah.
And my kids were little, and we drove well over 100 miles to see him at a noon hour show at McHenry Community College in Illinois. Otherwise, I'd never met him in person. And so we put together this CD project, and it proved to be pretty successful. I mean, you had bands that no longer exist, like Saint Somewhere, Matt Hall, and of course Quincy Yates was part of that. Mango had some great solo writers. I think at the time I had met Jim Morrison on vacation in Florida, and he had just come out with his second CD, Boca Nuts. So I wrote, had gotten some advice on how to get the licensing agreements, made sure that the writers got their songwriting royalties and that they kept any digital download rights. It was basically for exposure, and it was good music. There were some good songs on there. And I was in Texas at Larry Joe Taylor's festival, and I got another call from my wife, said, MTV's looking for you.
MTV.
And they had gotten the CD, and back then Amazon was in its infancy as well. And I sent them one CD. I got permission to send one CD, and I was very excited. And shortly after, I got an email back. They wanted two, and I thought, this is great. And about 4 days later, I got an email saying, we need 200 of these. And it went like that. We'd put stickers on. My kids and I would take a wagon, little red wagon full of CDs and envelopes and boxes up to ship to Amazon.
Wow.
So, you're not talking Warner Brothers, but the first volume sold about 11,000.
Dang, I didn't realize you pushed that many units. Wow.
That's unheard of by local standards.
Yeah.
Of course, there weren't a lot of digital downloads either.
Right.
And the artists themselves could sell it at their gigs. Disney called and got 24 copies to play at their lagoons because there was no offensive lyrics. And then we donated money. I think 50 cents from every CD sold went to the education fund of a lake schooner here in Milwaukee to bring kids out on the water. So it did some good. Introduced people to Brent Burns was on there, John Reno, Michael C. and Island Fever, James White, Jim Morris, Danny Morgan. I'm not sure who else off the top of my head, but nobody ever heard of these outside their region. So it kind of opened some eyes and got some exposure to some really good writers. And then, of course, that led to volume 2, volume 3, volume 4. And by the 4th volume, the CD sales had started to drop like any other CD sales because you could download stuff, and they all served their purpose and did well. And I think they did well for the artists. Well worth doing. But that's kind of, that was evolving along with the Parrothead music scene, which evolved into trop rock, by offshoot of the Margarita Mafia. I think Bertie Higgins was the one who came up with the phrase trop rock.
I've heard so many different people say they came up with it. And truth is, it's probably more than one person came up with it.
Yeah, but I think there was actually, he used it as a marketing thing. Bertie Higgins is the Key Largo singer.
Yeah.
He had that whole pirate theme going on his album cover. And it wouldn't surprise me that back in the 80s that he used that phrase.
Yeah. I want to go back to the Thongs albums for a minute, and I'm not sure the albums were called Thongs in the Key of Life, right?
Right, which was a parody of the Stevie Wonder album, Songs in the Key of Life. Had some problems with a local artist who wanted to put a woman in a thong bikini on the cover. And I had a friend of mine who was a marketing person, female my age, and said, there's a lot of people that don't think that's funny. And if you want to alienate half the checkbooks right out of the chute, go ahead. So I had been on vacation in Cedar Key, Florida, met an artist, went to a gallery and bought some prints from a woman named Carol Sacalarios. And I called her up and said, hey, I'm doing this. Could we get the rights to your artwork? And we worked out a deal. And part of that included her being able to sell the CDs in her gallery. And she sold, she'd get $25 at a time, and 2 or 3 weeks later, can I get 25 more? And so there were also a bunch of little beach boutiques around the country that sold them, in their gift shops and whatever.
Yeah.
Actually had an offer of a trade out to put a new brand on it, and Windjammer Cruises would distribute it to every one of their passengers. And I would get, I don't know how many cruises in exchange, but Windjammer didn't have any ports that they embarked from in the U.S. So you had to fly to get to wherever they were leaving from. And I had little kids. I mean, they might as well have said, if you can get to Mars, we'll let you sail for free. So I didn't do that. But it generated a lot of interest. Looking back, probably it was a much better business plan and much better product than I'd ever anticipated, and probably more than I realized.
Well, I just want you to know that so many people that I've talked to, pretty much anybody who was involved with trop rock before 2010. So I'm talking Brent and Jerry and James. They've all talked about how important those albums, especially the first two, back before any kind of social media. A lot of them didn't know each other existed until they, you said, hey, James, I want you to be on the CD. and James didn't know that Brent and Jerry existed until, or something along those lines.
Right.
It was almost social media for the musicians and the fans before there was social media.
Yeah, it was very much a word of mouth kind of thing. And you'd talk to somebody at a gig who would say, I saw this guy or this band somewhere else. And then, you had to hunt them up. I mean, at that time you could search for them online, but most of them didn't have a website. You did like anything else. Some of them you called the white pages. The directory assistant said, do you have a listing for John Reno in Alabama? And you would find them. And so
Wow.
I followed up a long way, a lot like that. I think I first met Jerry. He and Mary took the ferry over. Kevin and I and Howard were playing at, Howard Golub from the Boat Drunks. We knew Howard before the Boat Drunks ever existed. We met Howard on vacation in Put in Bay. We heard this harmonica coming out of the audience, and it didn't take a genius to realize it wasn't either one of us, and it was Howard on vacation. So we were at Riddles in the Sand, and I think Jerry and Mary and somebody else came over just as part of the audience.
Yeah.
That's where I met them. I mean, I knew of Key West, the band, and then certainly the evolution through Hannah's Reef. And so from a musical standpoint, you found people and then you kept in touch with them, and then more were added. And at some point you still sought out unique writers, different writers, people that told their stories in unique ways, so you weren't offering just the same old derivative. But it ran its course. I mean, I think off the top of my head, somebody could put together a brilliant Thongs 5 based on newer stuff.
But it's probably not worth it money-wise.
It was never worth it. It was never the intent to make money as much as just to do it. But by the same token, each of the writers was entitled to the songwriting royalties like they would on, if K-Tel brought their record.
Right.
I mean, it's not the same as McAnally having a cut on the NASCAR thing and selling 3 million. Nobody took their Thongs in the Key of Life check and went out and bought a Porsche. But they were good projects, good music, good writers, and a lot of them I've become really good friends with. That's to me far more important than the music.
Yeah, and the music, I mean, you spread it all over the world with those CDs, and then eventually you had a radio show for a while on Radio Margaritaville. I guess that was kind of a natural offshoot of putting together a compilation album, or?
Well, again, it was just the interest of music, and I think I did that for almost 3 years, and then after they switched formats, did it for another radio station, Ed Meyer. And it was the show was called the 3-Chord Barbecue. So it blended in a lot of Americana, Texas music, as well as what I guess would be called trop rock. And I had some demos. I had studio releases. It was like kind of an Americana version of Little Steven's underground garage without the talent or the ability. But I was pulling in stuff from all over, and then I would get, you'd have these great intros. This is Ray Wiley Hubbard, and you're listening to the 3-Chord Barbecue, or Dave Alvin, or Randy Wayne White, people like that to do the intros.
Wow.
So that was kind of fun, and it was enjoyable, or I wouldn't have done it. I think in the archives, I have one of those binders. I think I have a CD of every single one of those radio shows.
Wow. Weekly show?
Huh?
It was a weekly show?
Monthly, but they would air it several times a month, 3 or 4, maybe 5 times. And it was an hour long. And then I would, back then didn't have as many options. Certainly you didn't have Facebook. So you had a website though, and you had some options of posting the playlists. Pretty well received actually, in hindsight. And there was a lot of, I had a slogan. I had an artist friend came up with a logo for that, and the slogan said 3-Chord Barbecue, music too good for regular radio.
I like it. That's good.
Hey y'all, this is Kitty Stedman from Drop Dead Dangerous. I want to thank you for listening to Trop Rock 101 podcast with Pirates and Poets. Pirates and Poets is a crucial platform for independent artists and writers, and they have been working tirelessly to make sure that we make it through this difficult time. Please show them your support as well by visiting piratesandpoets.net/store or piratesandpoets.net/donate. Cheers, y'all.
So, one more question, kind of really on the historical aspect of it. I know Fins to the West, when they got started, 2004, 2005 or so, they were really trying to build a West Coast or Western United States version of Meeting of the Minds back then. And I know you helped a lot with the music selection and coordination and everything. How does a guy from Wisconsin end up helping with an event in Arizona?
Well, I can remember it was the year that there was something going on with one of the hotels, and I was at Party Gras. And I believe the hotel headquarters that year were the Montleone. And they used a TGIF on one of those streets as part of the venues. And I had met people at Meeting of the Minds and elsewhere, and Pete Ferralli and Patty Kahanick came up and said, what would you think if we started like a Meeting of the Minds type festival in Laughlin, Nevada? And I remember distinctly saying, are you crazy? But we got invited. It was small. You're outside. It's 100-some degrees. They had one shade tree and a bunch of hay bales. Bob Carwin was there, and nobody knew who Carwin was. Bob knew who Bob was, of course, but and his job was to make sure that everybody else knew who Bob was by the end of the week, and they did.
Yeah.
And so you had a very small festival, and it worked. And then part of it was, I think, because I knew I still listened to so much music. And stay in touch with people, that it was just, I knew a lot of people. They didn't really have like a musical director, and I only did it for a year or two where I always helped them out or answered questions, but it was able to get different people. And the same thing kind of happened with a festival in Michigan called Cheeseburger in Caseville. I got invited there, wasn't going to go. And then they said, we have to come, your name's in the brochure. And I got over there, and it was the original founder had seen us play at the boat show in Chicago. And when I got there, I was the only person who'd ever played this little event outside of Michigan. And I saw the local entertainment, and I saw their budget, and I thought, I have some people in my Rolodex. And I think the first person they got was Jerry Gontang from California, who probably played, in some way, shape, or form, the next 12 Cheeseburger and Casevilles. And then I said, well, James White. And then he came up there with Jim Morris. And the John Reno and the Half-Fast Creakers came. And then Jimmy and the Parrots. But that all came out of my Rolodex at one point, just because I had the contacts. And so I was able to do that, and it wasn't about me. None of the festival stuff was about me. It was about, I like music, and here's some really good musicians. And if you call this number, they'll probably say, yeah, we can do that for $100 less than you're throwing away. So, and then it's merit-based. Once those people got their gigs, they weren't invited back because of my Rolodex. They were invited back because they were good and people liked them, and they made the festivals better. And that's really all you could ask. And you've seen or heard most of these people. And a lot of them, if they get a shot, if they get their foot in the door, they're pretty much through it because they're good. It's just been back then without social media. It was, how do you get people to know who these people are? And between Thongs in the Key of Life and me talking to everybody under the sun nonstop, they got to know a lot of people.
Yeah, that Cheeseburger in Caseville, that's a really big thing now, right? Isn't it like 2 full weekends? And
it went from one weekend to 11 days, both weekends bookending the whole week.
Wow.
I don't know how big it is still. Haven't been there for a while. One year, in fact, that was the impetus for, because Tom Corcoran was staying at the same guest house. And that's where the song Bone Island Mambo came, based on a book he had written. And so that's the first time I had met him. I mean, that festival was so big they could bring authors up who would sell books and do well.
Well, I think as of 2019, it was still 10 or 11 days, because Jim Asbill and I talked about it in a previous podcast. He's been in the rotation the last several years, and it was still going strong in 19, I guess.
It's a good thing. I mean, and it's hard for me to keep track because I'm not as, probably say, aggressive as I used to be when it comes to seeking out the festival gigs and traveling all the time, because for me, the music's always been just an offshoot of my writing.
Right.
And so I'm lucky to, I've always had a good full-time job in some sort of writing or editing or, digital media. And I'm also able to fill a lot of my nights and weekends with freelance sports writing, which I had done as that was my full-time job for a long time. And I still like doing it. I mean, this week I have 3 high school events, and tomorrow night I have Wisconsin Badger men's basketball. And, if somebody wants, I'm not the guy, if I want a second job, Dairy Queen's not it. I don't have the skills to work at Home Depot and tell people how to fix their whatever. So, I balance my time with my family, being in the press box, music when it comes my way. Fortunate to have these adjunct teaching gigs in subjects I really enjoy. And that's all on top of a full-time gig. So you just kind of juggle it all. Like to play music, but I'd rather write than play. But unfortunately, I have to play so people can hear my songs, because I don't have any other way to get the words out there. So I play a little bit and appreciate every gig I get. I mean, I've played Party Gras a lot, and it's just
you
such
are
a privilege.
the second longest tenured third if you count Jerry, but outside of Jerry, Brent's played all but 2. You've played, I guess this one coming up will be your 20th, I think. So
I don't know. Yeah, you're getting into the really the Tom Brady and Drew Brees of Trop Rock if Brent and I are there.
Yeah, so you were telling me earlier a story about the birth of Trop Rock, and Brent Burns was there.
Yeah, that was I think Brent in I think it was the spring of 1943. Was playing a small, I actually think it was a bait shop, if I remember correctly. And didn't have enough money to buy shiners, but he had a guitar, and he if he would play some music, they would let him get the bait. And so he did that gig, and then he got some more of those coastal things. But yeah, I think it was the early 40s. Of course, most of the good musicians were off in the military, so Brent got some opportunities and took advantage of them. And that's only 77 years ago. So
so he was like the you hear about these baseball players, one-armed pitchers and stuff that got to make the majors during World War II. Brent was kind of the musical equivalent of that.
Well, actually, if you go back and look at Brent's bio, and I forget which TV shows he were on, and maybe on the top 40, he had a pretty good musical career before Trop Rock.
He did.
And of course, he is an Army veteran. Served in Vietnam. And I shouldn't say Army, because I don't know, it might have been the Marines, but I know he was a Vietnam veteran, and one of the nicest people on the planet. I have been on vacation. My family, my sisters have been on vacation. I don't know how many people I've sent to, if you're in Gulf Shores, Alabama, go to Lulu's and look up this guy. And, he's just a good friend. We've been friends for a long time. And I actually don't think it was 1943. It's probably in the early 60s when he really got going.
I've actually got back there in my bedroom a 45, a promo 45 from one of his early singles. When I was getting ready to interview him, I couldn't remember the song that he had on. I guess it was Paul Harvey that got played several times. I was looking that up because I couldn't remember the details about it, and an eBay listing popped up. So I have this promo only copy of a Brent Burns 45. I spent more on shipping than I did to actually buy the vinyl.
Well, and I want to say he had been on the Mike Douglas show or Merv Griffin or one of those
there was something
variety
like that too. Yeah.
variety shows of the era. And I mean, those are hard to come by. But that just kind of tells you there's some pedigrees behind these people that a lot of the current audience doesn't know about. There's a reason why they're successful and their songs are good. And of course, Brent co-writes with some of the best people in Nashville. He's got a really nice formula for what works for him. And he's a good writer. He's just a really good writer.
He is that for sure. So you mentioned record collection, and occasionally you make Facebook posts about your record collection. So I just want to know, like, how big is it?
It's not. I think it's dwindled over the years, unfortunately. I don't know. I think there's an oak cabinet behind my desk that is 10 feet long, at least. And the entire bottom shelf is just a row of albums that I can get to by spinning my chair around.
Wow.
I have a turntable behind my desk at work. And I'll listen to a lot of stuff. I've started to buy. I still dig. One of my favorite afternoons is if I can go to a used record store. But I've also started to buy some new releases on vinyl again.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Listen to them a lot.
Do you? And obviously you've collected a lot of CDs over the years. Do you listen to Spotify or Apple Music at all when you're on the go, or is that just a complete no-go?
I don't. And the only reason is, the main reason I don't listen to Spotify is because I know what their financial structure is. And last quarter, thanks to BMI, I had 34,000 digital streams of my music in one quarter, and I got $16.
Wow.
So I am not a fan of most streaming outlets. I don't think my music necessarily should be buying new wastebaskets for the people at Spotify, whether they're gold plated or not. So, but also, when I asked my class this, how many of them listen to the radio when they drive around in their car? None, zero. They listen to Spotify, and I asked them, well, is it set up for new music or is it music you like? And it was unanimous. It's music they like. And my question to them was, if that's what you do, how do you hear new music? And somehow the Facebook algorithms have finally narrowed my ads that come across down to journalism, coffee, and music. And so I get probably 6 or 7 posts, that are paid for, sponsored, or ads of new music every day. And I listen to most of them.
Really?
And I bookmark those things in a file because there's some really good stuff. And a lot of times I'll hear something, and just as a cold message, I'll send somebody a note saying, hey, you're not going to believe this, but I heard this. This is fabulous. And that was kind of the approach I used to find music for my radio show. And I listen to a lot of new music. I can usually tell for me, the first 10 seconds, if it's a song, it's not a song I like, but I can tell you in the first 10 seconds if it's a song I'll hate. And I don't listen to the rest of it. But a lot of them I listen all the way through, and some of it's lyric based, some of it's the arrangement, some of it's the instrumentation. I'd never actually heard of an all-girl, all-female surf rock guitar band out of Canada with a great name called the Surfragettes. They're fabulous.
I ran across them not too long ago, believe it or not. That's funny.
So I did that. I did a musical advent calendar for Christmas, which was a new song every day for 25 days. Played a different song every day.
Right.
And I came across some were new that had been released, that week by people turning out new Christmas music. And that's usually where I found that stuff, was stuff being sent my way. And I listened to all of it. And then, the music class enabled me to learn a little bit more about Motown and Stax and the Wrecking Crew. And various in Muscle Shoals and find out which artists had done what. And so, by touching base with them, you got a few more musical suggestions every week. So yeah, it's a hobby. And I've been fortunate to capitalize on it a little bit with writing some songs. But if I didn't pick up a guitar ever again, I mean, I'd still listen to new music every day.
There you go. You definitely have one of the widest. I don't know what word I want to use. Encyclopedia of music to draw on of anybody I know. So.
Well, my resume is not real deep, but it's pretty broad.
Yeah.
And it's I think part of it is I want to say journalism and writing, but it's just an offshoot of always being an avid reader, I think. And so you appreciate well-written anything, and I've always been a reader of newspapers, magazines, books, fiction, nonfiction, as much as I can glean, and that led to writing. And then when you listen to a lot of music, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a good instrumental or a pop song. But I also, as my kids will say, yeah, you like those 17-minute songs by some Texas guy with a bad voice, and he speaks half of it. I'm good with that. And then that's why I think at most, even at Trop Rock things, a lot of times I'll sit in the back where I can hear everything. And sometimes you come away from like Meeting of the Minds and you've listened to music for 4 or 5 days, and there's 2 songs that just stick in your head.
Yeah.
Listen to all of them, but you can pull that out of that whole smorgasbord of music, and you just realize there's some really good writing. And I appreciate that. I mean, I admire what goes into it.
So, got a few listener submitted questions. I posted on Facebook that you and I were going to be talking, and had a few people ask, send in questions they want answered. Let's kind of go behind the song into the history of a couple of songs. Kings of Black Velvet.
Well, I mean, that was started from seeing a guy, and we were on a trip down to end of basketball season down to Sanibel, Florida, and got on a detour in Kentucky, and drove by a roadside stand where they were selling black velvet paintings, and the majority of them were Elvis and Jesus. A few dogs playing poker, and a couple of the oddball, a couple of bullfighters. That type of stuff, but the majority of them were Elvis and Jesus. And it was kind of then you let your imagination wander, like you had found the place where all the black velvet paintings come from. And I just envisioned a conversation between the two of them while they're hanging out there all day waiting to be sold. And that's really all it was. And then it just got weirder, because then the conversation could speak for itself. And it's just the way it's not so much the way I write, it's often the way I think, which of course explains my meteoric career success. Stuff like that comes back to haunt you. But I've had people say it's an interesting song. I've had a minister in Iowa asked if he could use it as part of a church service.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because what he wanted to emphasize was that these people probably shouldn't be on the same plane of worship. And I said, yeah, that's kind of it exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it was the year at Meeting of the Minds where they had the hurricane, and they had to move it from the Casa over to the Reef or the Reach or whatever that.
The Reach.
And a woman came up to me after I played that, and was just in my face and said, "We don't stand for that down here." So, I mean, but at least she listened, and that's all you can ask. Yeah. I mean, if they listen well enough to hate it, then you're doing your job.
And wasn't that recorded in Port Aransas, Texas?
Yeah, that was a project that started. I met Larry Joe Taylor at Gary P. Nunn's festival. Stayed in touch, and I was getting ready I had some new songs. And stayed in touch with Larry Joe and played a couple of his festivals. He'd come up here to Milwaukee for a couple shows. And he basically said, well, why don't you come down here? Well, we can do that cheaper than you can do it in Milwaukee. And that led to the studio guys coming in. He said, I hope you don't mind, but I got this guitarist, John Inman, will play on it. I was like, I'm pretty good with that. And then the bass player couldn't make it, so they got Bob Livingston, and I'm like, I'm all right with that. And then the piano player couldn't come, so he said, well, we got Floyd Domino, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is all right. So yeah, that was the first record I did down there in Port Aransas.
For people who don't know, that was a good chunk of Jerry Jeff Walker's Lost Gonzo band backing you up on that.
Yeah, pretty much the core of that, and they're such nice people, obviously fabulous musicians. It was a treat. You go anytime you're somebody like me and you can go into a studio and you're in there with half of your college record collection. That's a good day.
Yeah. And you did that at Third Coast Studio, didn't you?
Yeah, Jim Urban's place.
What was the setup of that? I mean, I've done it. We did a Pirates and Poets show in there a few years ago, and it was set up for the concert setting, but I can't imagine that. Did you just use the whole big room?
No, the concert was kind of in another room, I think, that had a balcony at the time.
Yeah.
This was a standalone studio, and I don't know enough to know about the equipment to know what kind of board they had at the time. And Larry Joe's son, Zach, who did the drumming, also did a lot of the engineering. For me, it was amazing to watch those guys work, mixing and recording and playing their parts and creating stuff. I got there and I brought my guitar over to the studio, and I remember Larry Joe saying, we got a saying down here. We like what you're trying to do. And said, so you can take your guitar back to the room. Which I did. And then John Inman had these charts drawn up of the songs, and they were, music terms, diamond, half bar, telling Bob Livingston, play those little short, choppy McCartney notes you did on Willie's album. And then they look at me and they say, when we get to 3, you start. You can count, can't you? So, and then, that for me, again, that was a step up, and that record did really well. And when I say that, if you can get a smattering of airplay around the world on various Americana or different kind of programs, enough to where you get some good publicity, I mean, that's what I mean. It does well. People listened to it and it got played and sold the amount I needed it to sell. It's not like I'm going to be hosting Saturday Night Live, but it did well enough to eventually, and I'm never in a hurry, might go 5, 6, 8 years between records. It led to the next one in Texas, which is where Callin' and Gone came from, and some other songs. Again, that was, John Inman and Bob Livingston. Fabulous accordion player named Rad Lorkovic, who was in town for South by Southwest. So yeah, it led to some really good friendships and relationships, and obviously tapping into an incredible amount of musical ability. And then the last one I did up here in Wisconsin with some equally good players who have played New Orleans Jazz Fest and World Beat bands and have been on major labels. Little different sound, but it worked. And that one, when you do enough marketing and enough envelope stuffing, and that's what I do. I like it. I like the challenge of marketing. And at the end of the night, for me to sit and write 100 letters and stuff 100 envelopes, it's all part of the thing. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of musicians hate that part of it.
Right.
I always liked it. So then you look at the Americana chart, and all of a sudden for 1 week, you tell your kids, I'm not high and I'm not going to be there long, but I'm tied with Neil Young. And then your kids look at you and go, who's Neil Young? Which takes a little bit of the luster off it. But, for to get that kind of enough airplay total to even get a mention on that is nice validation.
Especially if you're doing the promotion yourself. That's even more impressive.
Yeah, well, I don't, it was never a desire to hook up with get a record deal or have to pay a publicist, even a booking agent. Because very few people know what I do better than I do.
Right.
So, and it's the same approach. Getting a gig is not all that different from getting a freelance sports assignment. There's a slot and you want it, and you give it your best shot. Write a good cover letter. Be polite. Say thank you, and no regrets if you don't get it, because at some point you're going to have to write that same person another letter. So you don't want to burn any bridges. So I don't know if it's hard to at the level of what I do. It's really hard to imagine anybody who's gotten much more out of 3 chords in a hobby than I have.
You've got some really cool stories. You've opened for a lot of really big names at that hall there in Milwaukee, right?
Yeah, and other places around Wisconsin. My friend Peter Jest is the owner of Shank Hall. It's a music club, and Shank Hall gets its name from the club in Spinal Tap. And I've had some wonderful opening act opportunities there and elsewhere throughout Wisconsin, which led to other promoters. But again, it's a privilege, and they're free songwriting schools. If you get to open for everybody from Rodney Crowell to Warren Zevon to Jerry Jeff to Todd Snyder to Robert Earl Keane, theater shows with Rick Springfield, Roger McGuinn. There's just dozens of people I've opened for, and I do my 30 to 45 minutes. I don't drink on stage. They're not there to see me, but it's led to some really good secondary opportunities because of that. And
right.
Sitting backstage, watching from behind the curtain and watching Mac McAnally, or watching Sonny Landreth, or people like that. It's incredible. They're just so good. And it's a free songwriting school. But also more than that, it's how they work a room, how they relate to their audience. And you get to do it 2 or 3 times to open for somebody. And they actually, opened, I think 3 times, done nights with Kinky Friedman, 2 of which we went out to dinner afterwards.
Wow.
So if, spending a midnight dinner with Kinky Friedman is an experience.
I think probably spending any kind of time with Kinky Friedman's an experience, but
yes. So, that's what I mean about 1, I've gotten a lot out of it, and 2, I'm extremely fortunate. Just really am.
Well, I think it's been I've enjoyed knowing you and listening to your music. I've probably known of you for 16 or 17 years now, and we've been friends for a good 12 or 14 probably. So thank you for everything you've done for Pirates and Poets and myself over the years. So,
well, yeah, I think when I first met you, I think you'd only been to prison twice.
That's right. We're up to 4 now. So
yes. So no, it's been a long time. And like I said, I've met a lot of good friends, and my stories come from the people I meet. I could write probably a small opera on you and Earl, but I just haven't gotten around to it. So
you should do that sometime. Earl would really appreciate
opera.
It, so. Well, hey, we always close this out with some rapid fire questions. I don't know how rapid they'll be with Jim Hoehn answering them, but if you're ready,
yeah,
I'll shoot them at you. What's your favorite Jimmy Buffett song?
He Went to Paris.
Good answer. So, favorite beach?
Probably the one I'm at any given moment. I'm from Wisconsin, so anywhere I'm on a beach is good. Was just at North Captiva Island, which was fabulous. I've been through the Caribbean. They're all good. Yeah, I would say they're all good. They're all different, but they're all good.
All right. Favorite song or songs by an independent trop rock artist?
Oh, that's a bit, that's hard, because there's some really good ones and they're very different, but I might go back to, and it varies from time to time, and I like wordplay a lot. So, and I don't even, not 100% sure of the, all the titles, but I could listen to Jim Morris music a lot, almost any day of the week. Maybe because of my background, his song about the writer guy living below you, I liked, and whatever song had the rhyme about a waitress named Susanna at the only Chinese restaurant in Butte, Montana. It's good writing. It's good writing. And if I had to pick one, if someone said, "Hey, pick a song," and again, I'm not sure the title. The one that just popped into my head was Scott Kirby's "Lucky Enough."
Scott Kirby is a
Yeah.
hell of a writer for sure.
Yes, yeah, he is, and he's he's sit down on his stool and here's my songs. But that song has always resonated with me. And he wrote one also about when Carl Wilson died that I thought was phenomenal. But they all have some gems that are, you just got to tip your hat, There's a couple of them that Jerry has written that I thought just the right millionaire country guy has not heard yet, because they're good songs.
Yeah, there's a couple dozen songs rattling around the trop rock world that, like you said, if the right country guy got a hold of them, one of our friends' bank accounts would get substantially bigger. So
yeah, and that's when you get the privilege of saying, I knew that guy when he was horrible.
Yeah. So I know you're not much of a drinker, but if you're going to make a cocktail and listen to records late at night, what's it going to be?
Well, this probably goes back to my rugby days. You could just open up one bottle of Leinenkugel's, a long neck Leinenkugel's beer, and I'm good with that. Not a flavored shanty or summer whatever or spritzer or anything like that. Just the Leinies. I'm good with that.
All right. And you've already talked about your favorite Buffett song. What's your favorite Buffett album, start to finish?
Trying to remember what's on what, and it would have to be, I want to say, probably a white sport coat and a pink crustacean.
I think that if I went back and added all these up, that would probably be either that or A1A, or probably the two front runners. At some point, I need to go back and add all these answers up.
Yeah, those, it's that early Buffett songwriter stuff that I really enjoy. And he's just a good writer. And he was a great observer of you could walk into a bar and write a song about any of 8 different people. That's hard to do. And he would tell their story and you could picture the guy. I don't know how old the song Ace is. I still like that song.
Wow. It's got to be getting pretty old.
Yeah. But I like that. So, yeah, it'd be one of those two. But I think white sport coat probably.
Okay. And the big question that we always finish with, if you were going to build a Mount Rushmore of independent trop rock artists, what 4 faces would you put on there?
Well, all that does is alienate people 5 and 6, but I would probably have to say Jim Morris.
Okay.
James White. Probably Jerry Diaz, both for music and his contribution to the genre.
And the 4th spot always gets hard for people.
It does, because that's like judging a contest. Whoever loses gets angry. And this is kind of out there, but when I think about it, this is the only guy who had one cut on each of the 4 Thongs albums.
Okay.
And again, but is trop rock easily definable? No, it's all over the place.
Exactly.
And then you figure the overall scope, body of work, contribution to music and musicians, which he's done a tremendous amount for. He might have to get his hair cut before he goes on the thing, but I'm putting Larry Joe Taylor up there.
Wow. I think you are the first person to mention Larry Joe, but people don't think of him as being part of the trop rock scene anymore. But when I first started coming around 2005, 2006, he played not a lot, but he played 2 or 3 a year at the bigger events,
Yeah. And again, what kind of writing is it? But he has played that. He does his own music festival, which is much more Americana, Texas country, outlaw country. But that's where those distinctions blur together. I mean, if you were, I don't consider him to be an independent artist because of his pedigree, but at the top of that list, again, it's what's an independent artist? I'd put Keith Sykes up there.
Yeah.
You know, I would. But is he an independent artist? I don't know.
I'd put him into the category of, for trop rock at least, I'd put him into that category of a pseudo coral reefer.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
kind of like I consider Brendan Mayer, totally different generation, but kind of a pseudo, you know, has ties to Buffett in the ways that none of our independent friends do. So
correct. So I mean, you know, I think Keith's a genius.
oh yeah.
And so I like even his new stuff, fabulous. But again, it's that distinction. So yeah, I would put Larry Joe up there.
All right. And the final question, you get to add one more face. This is somebody off stage, radio, event personnel, just a member of the community, somebody who's a non-musician. Who would you add?
Well, I think probably if I just had to add one person based on everything, I'd add Mary Diaz.
Oh, you're the second or third person to add Mary Diaz.
But so, you know, not far behind. You could add Pam and Earl.
Yeah.
And then anybody who's hired me for any event, going all the way back to Alex Leist at Meeting of the Minds. But yeah, Mary Diaz.
All right. Well, Jim, I appreciate you visiting with me. Look forward to you know, if the world will keep itself on its axis, we'll see each other in a couple of months at Party Girl. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm
be an interesting Party Girl.
I'm working on my pail as we speak.
Well, it'll probably be 85 degrees in Texas by the time Party Girl in April rolls around. So,
you know, but there were some times in April where I could go to a music event in April in good conscience because the Brewers already had been eliminated. This year they might still be in contention in April.
Yeah, on April 8th, surely they'll still be in contention.
Yes.
If I get lucky, the Cubs might even still be in it after we've traded everybody away. But
yes, yeah, it'll be interesting. But again, that's you know, if you're gonna have a second gig sitting in the press box, not a bad one.
No. Well, Jim, thank you again, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.